Good morning. This is
Good
Karl
morning.
Dakin, and this is the Successful Funding Show. For those of you who are new to the show, this is a weekly program that I put on where we talk about funding. And each week I invite a guest to come in and join me and talk about a particular aspect of funding. Now, a lot of the commentary conversation is going to be about small businesses, but most people will find that everything we talk about also applies to raising money for a charity or a community project or something like that. And for those also who are new to this, the we allow the audience to participate and encourage you to do so. So if you're listening in this morning, please say hello in the chat. Tell us who you are and what your interest is in funding. And then during the course of the show, if you have a question or comment, please volunteer that and add to the program, and we appreciate it. So, with that, we're going to get started this morning with my guest, Lucas Marquardt. Lucas is a longtime friend of mine, and we have worked together on a variety of projects to help mutual clients raise funding. And Lucas, please share with the audience a little bit about yourself, your background, how you came to be in this unique role of providing services to small businesses, and then we'll jump into the question about how to get a business ready to receive capital.
Good morning, Carl. Thanks, and it's great to be here. I have a deep background in uh, being the finance guy for small businesses, and I guess I kind of stumbled into that. I did my undergraduate degree in finance at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and went on to earn an MBA in accounting from the University of Technology in Sydney, Australia. And when I returned back to the US from Australia, I joined a small manufacturing company in San Diego as their director of finance and was immediately thrown into all the different things that a small business is dealing with on a daily, weekly basis. And being the finance guy, I was in the middle of all of it. So I was touching sales and operations and HR and IT, and it just really was fulfilling to be in a role where you could see the numbers flow through the business and really help the business owners interpret what it meant. And since then, that was 2006. So fast forward almost 20 years, and I'm still doing the same thing, but in a contract capacity. We refer to the role as either a fractional CFO or a consulting CFO. And I guess the basic premise is that most small businesses that have annual revenues between 2 and 25 million don't necessarily need a full-time CFO to sit in the chair and do everything that we do. So the concept of being a fractional CFO allows me to help multiple clients at the same time and in essence add value in what I can provide to them in a cost-effective and I guess wide-spanning way. So it's been very fulfilling for me, and it's a perfect fit to be able to kind of check in and make an impact, and then move on, or check in with another client. And it's I've tried to get away from it several times. I've been the corporate VP finance guy, and it just didn't I never felt like I had the impact that I do in my current role. So that's my short background.
No, it's great. I mean, that's why I think that we work so well together because I serve in a similar capacity where somebody needs to go raise funding, which a business doesn't necessarily have to do all the time, and some businesses do it periodically or every now and then. And they don't need someone that's on the payroll full time. They can't afford to have someone on the payroll full time who does nothing except look at their capital needs, they're building their strategy, revising, updating their strategy, and then supporting or leading an effort to go out and raise some bucks. So you have to come up with a consultancy type of arrangement where you bring value on a case by case basis to different businesses, and you're trying to help them get to a goal or a milestone towards their larger goals, and see what can happen. It's interesting, and I'm working on building a community right now of people who, like us, are out helping small businesses raise capital. And essentially, I'm building what I call a team of people who represent every skill base that's out there that may need to be used in a capital campaign. And one of those, though, that is clearly critical to each capital campaign is the person who works with the finances. Um, I talk about the phrase ready to receive capital. This is a term that we throw around in as consultants, but we try to impress upon our clients that just because you need money and you may have needed it yesterday doesn't mean you're ready to receive that money today. So, what does the term "ready to receive capital" mean to you, Lucas? And dive in deep to what that means from a CFO's position.
I tell my clients that the easiest way to get capital is to not need it. If you're a business that doesn't need a bank loan, no problem. You can get the cheapest bank loan you can possibly get, the most, the grandest line of credit you could ever hope for, if you don't need it. And I think that most businesses, especially those that are growing, and we hope that most of the clients we work with are growing, it's not a matter of if, but when they're going to need capital. And that can come in multiple different forms, and you cover all sorts of forms on the show. But in my world, it's either bank debt, traditional debt, or investment. And both of those require a certain level of readiness to even go down that path. And to hurry up and get there when you need it is a painful exercise.
Actually, it turns out there's no such thing as hurry up. It's it's a matter of doing it in less time that you should reasonably allocate to the task, but it's still going to take time. I've been through a number of situations where a business has come to me and they are running out of cash, or they've already run out of cash, and they're kind of painted themselves in a corner, and they say, "Hey, let's go raise money today." Like we're going to drop everything, walk out the door, and stop the first car on the street and ask it for money. And yet, to tell the story of the business, to attract and motivate somebody to invest in that business is going to require showing the financials. And in almost every case where the government is regulating the sale of securities or raising capital, the government requires you to disclose these financials. And so at that point, if the business financials are not up to date, and that's varies on who's asking the question, whether it's through the last calendar quarter or within the last 6 months. But if you don't have your financials ready, everything has to stop until those financials are ready. So what generally does that look like from your standpoint?
Well, Carl, that can mean a number of different things. It's been my experience that every business starts with a service or a product that the business owner figures out people will pay for. And, they start providing more of the service and more of this product. And eventually, they realize that this is an actual business. And the last thing they think about when it comes to running this business is keeping the financials. They're trying to keep money in the bank. They're trying to keep the product on the shelf or the services that are being offered. And so the accounting, and by way of accounting, the finances tends to be an afterthought. And so what happens is, as a business gains momentum, this can gets kicked down the road. And then maybe they bring in somebody who is, there's, brother-in-law's sister who did some accounting and bookkeeping a while back, and now they have an office manager. And this person is great. And most of the time, they really care about the business. They actually have an acumen that is, you know, fantastic for the role that they're in, but they're still essentially a bookkeeper or office manager. And the business gets to a point, typically 2 million in revenues, where it gets too complex for somebody without that accounting and finance training to run the business. And so the readiness and the state of the books really depends on who is handling the books at the time and what the current state of the business is. If it's just been like, hey, let's just keep up, make sure that, you know, the accounts are reconciled and the CPA gets the um, uh, books at the end of the year and can provide tax statements, everything, you know, backward looking. There comes a point where you can't run a business, you certainly can't raise capital, and you can't steer the ship that you're on looking out of the rearview window, the rearview mirror. I think the readiness that you're talking about comes at that point where the business owner wants to start looking out the windshield instead of looking backwards. And that's where the books become, the accounting and the financial management becomes not incredibly, but quite a bit more complex when it comes to the requirements of what's needed for the books. And I think once you hit that point, you can either accept it or fight it. But if you accept it and take it on, then you're on the path to raise capital and do quite a bit of other things with the business. But until you convert from the beginning state to where you need to be, I think it's very difficult to be ready to do anything in the way of raising capital.
Yeah, so I had Pat Linden on a few weeks ago, who is an expert in buying and selling businesses. And one of the common issues in putting together an investment campaign is putting a valuation or price on the business. This is not the price of the products, it's not the price of the services, it's kind of the aggregate value or perception of value that occurs because the business is being successful in selling products and services. And we're going to continue to have long debates and discussions about what is the proper mechanism for evaluation of a business. But Pat was clear to point out that when he's looking at a business that is being sold, he typically looks at the last 1 to 2 years of financial transactions. And as I'm working with the regulators, trying to make sure they get all the information they need to check the boxes, we typically are looking at profit and loss statements, which show how much money you did or did not make. We're looking at net worth, which is a statement of what are your current debts versus your current assets. We have a third one, which is the cap table or ownership registry, which shows everyone who owns any part of the company, what percentage that may represent. And then we have cash flow projections, which is an attempt by the business to forecast where it expects it may end up 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And all of these are important. I mean, you cannot raise money without any of this information. But I tend to find, as you talked about, a lot of times they don't have their books and records up to date. They filed their tax return, but it doesn't really tell their story well. They may have a cap table, but since it's not commonly looked at, it's often out of date, incomplete, or needs additions or removals in order to bring it up to date. And then the cash flow projection is one that is absolutely essential. I take the position that the valuation of the business is not today, but it's at whatever point in the future when an investor wants to exit the investment and cash in their chips and go home. And so, in order to put a price on it today, we have to know what tomorrow is going to bring. And so these four different types of what I call documents or financial documents are key to telling the story.
I completely agree. If I can if I can say one thing identifies um, I guess the maturity of the business from a financial standpoint is their ability to forecast cash, to have a cash flow projection that accurately represents what the book balance will be in a week from now, in 6 months from now. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's something that takes in all the considerations to what affects cash coming in and out of the business. And it's not as simple as you think. And certainly something that I've found is very reliant or dependent on the ability to keep the books on an accrual basis. Now, most business owners are start off and they'll always look at the cash basis, what actually came into their bank account and what actually went out during that month. Most of them will still file taxes on the cash basis, and that's fine. But to properly design your financials and tell the story that you want to tell to investors or whomever, they need to be on an accrual basis, and that will drive your cash forecast. It actually is your translation of your accrual based accounting to the actual ins and outs. And those two tools will allow you to speak to not just business owners, but also investors and any other consultants that are coming into the business to help understand what's going on and paint an accurate picture of what's actually happening.
Yeah, so let me give a shout out to a member of our audience. Harvey Tuck has shown up. Harvey's in London most of the time. He works with a coffee house franchisor, and he's always out and about on car, by train, by plane, moving back and forth across the UK, pitching local people to become their own business owners and start up a business by operating a coffee shop. Harvey is also part of a group of people who have been mentoring me, along with Don Cohen, Kelly Steineke, and Beverly Glazier, who all have far more experience than I have in putting on a show like this. And they have been working with me to help me do a better job of doing what I'm doing today, and then also advise me on how to use LinkedIn as a complement to what I'm doing. So if you're not aware, I put out a daily newsletter called Instant Funding. You can subscribe for free on LinkedIn. And then this show is put on every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, which means for Harvey that it's getting into mid afternoon over in the UK. But Harvey, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show. So going back, Lucas, we talk about cash flow projections, and this is in some ways both an art and a science, because you've got to get out a crystal ball. You have to predict the future. No one I've ever seen has ever predicted the future accurately. Although I have to say that I've seen far more, I'll call it nearly accurate cash flow projections than weather projections. So just to put it in that realm. But what I do is I start walking through everything that the business is doing, and I call them assumptions. These are guesses on where I think the business is going to go, and it includes all the cost, all the revenue, and we get what we call a bright and cheery picture. And then what I like to do is I like to hammer this with a series of scenarios of what if things went great? What if I got a call from a celebrity and they want to endorse my product? Or on the other turn, what if COVID happens? Or what if inflation happens? Or what if the feds raise interest rates, which are all still hurting, if not crippling, if not killing off businesses everywhere. And you have to take this into consideration as well, because when you go to ask somebody for use of their money, they fully expect you to give 100% of that money back. Now, we may have different opinions about how much appreciation or return on investment may occur. But at bottom line, no investor ever makes an investment with the anticipation or expectation that they're going to lose money. It's not in the cards. So, how do you go about determining what these projections assumptions should be? What's your a process that you apply?
The most comprehensive way to produce those types of pro forma financials and cash flow projections is through a financial model, and a financial model that is built on a number of different variables that can be changed to war game, to ad hoc, to really see what happens if that particular scenario happens. A financial model can't be a static thing. It has to be um, a working model that allows you to dynamically play with the input variable and essentially produce a three statement pro forma financial statements that will be based on those inputs. So, inflation, interest rates, those can all be part of your input variables. And when you do that, they'll produce different financial statements for year one, year 4 or 5, whatever it is you're looking at. It doesn't mean that you have to represent or present the model as your investment or your fundraising document, but the resulting financial statements that you've created through the use of that model are certainly ones that you can present as a best case, as a worst case, and anywhere in between. And it allows your investor to see that you have taken into consideration all these different things that could happen and modeled out what that result could be. The smallest variable may have the biggest impact, and the biggest variable may have the smallest impact. So they need to know that you've looked at what the effects are and can demonstrate it in real time if they come back with questions, which they usually do.
Yeah, I typically, everybody opens up an offering memorandum, which can be anywhere from 10 pages to 80 pages in length, and they all have their favorite section. Most people, quite frankly, read the summary at the beginning, and that's all they read before making an investment decision. And when you're doing crowdfunding, where you're talking about raising a very small amount of money from each individual investor, you really can't expect that investor candidate to spend any significant time reading the document. But if I have the time to look at a document where I need to go deep, I like to go to the cash flow projection, and then I like to go to the stated assumptions or considerations that went into that statement, because this gives me basically a door into the mind of the entrepreneur who's running that particular business. It will show to me how cautious or uncautious they may be, how thoughtful, how well they know their industry, whether they recognize a risk that I think should have been discussed or should have been included in that projection. And so to me, it's like reading the mind of the entrepreneur, and it gives me the best understanding of whether this is a Hail Mary pass type of investment offer, or possibly even too conservative within a particular market. But again, it's surprising to me how many businesses get ready to receive money and they will tell an investor, "We're going to do better. We're going to make you rich." And they don't get into any detail about how, why that may happen.
It's a hard balance to strike, though, right? Because you want to paint a picture of blue skies and prosperity and all these things that the business is very possible. It's possible that they could get those things, but you have to balance with the level of conservatism and reality that allows you to tell a story in a way that, as you said, is believable. And I think if you stray too far from one side to the next, it's perceptible, and it will throw off your efforts to try to go out and raise money. So I think there's that coaching for an entrepreneur or business owner that's looking to raise money is absolutely correct. You can't you can't prop them up too much, but you also can't drag them down at the same time. So, how do you create a narrative backed by numbers that is realistic, believable, but also gets people a little excited about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that no investor wants to invest with the expectation of a loss, but they all want to get revved up. They all want to see that this is going to be a success, that this is going to make them look like a genius for picking this particular investment over all the other choices. But the story that's told in that cash flow projection is a reflection of the mindset of the entrepreneur, and the investor is looking at this and judging the credibility of that particular entrepreneur. Is this person really know what they're talking about? Do they have a good handle on the market and the business and operations? You will see offering documents come in that say a business is going to scale from $100,000 to $10 million in 2 years. And you look at this document, you're going, how do they ever expect to accomplish that? And the investor, once their mind starts going down that path, the credibility of the offering is plummeting. Because the investor goes, yeah, they may have a great market, they may have a great product, but it doesn't look like they understand how to grow and scale a business. They don't understand the infrastructure, the team, all the other things that go into that. And if they don't understand it, I'm not placing bets on this particular business.
Well, to that point, from the finance side, scaling is expensive. When a business is growing, 90 cents of every dollar you make is going back into the business, so whether it's to buy more inventory or hire more staff, or it's expensive. So if you are drawing yourself a hockey stick of growth, there has to be, timely injections of capital, reliable injections of capital to support that growth. I've got clients that are manufacturing companies that are growing like crazy, and their products are incredibly popular. And their biggest issue right now is, how do we pay for more inventory to build more products? And they're constantly feeling cash poor, because even though they have this incredible business that's making money, but growth is expensive.
Yeah, it's one of the things that when I see a company that I think has significant growth potential, they more than anybody else need to do a multi-year capital strategy that understands all the resources required to get from where they're at to where they want to go, and then kind of reverse engineering, going, if I need that extra facility, I need to hire those 5 more or 50 more people. Where is the money going to come from? And that's why I understand your reference to using accrual accounting, in that it's not tied to the day the money shows up, because in the real life, you need that money already in place. You can't go raising money 10 days after you need it to make payroll. That doesn't work for good relationships with your team. It is interesting to see how well people put that out there. And they just really need to get out ahead of it. And it seems that small businesses have a tendency to be reactive in this regard rather than proactive, getting out ahead of the game.
Karl, if people take one thing from this segment, I would hope that they would take exactly that wherever you're at in your business, you need to have a capital strategy. You're going to need money at some point. It doesn't mean you have to sell your company. It doesn't mean you have to take on a bunch of debt. It can mean a lot of different things. But as a business owner, you're going to need, even if it's a line of credit for working capital that you have on the side that you use occasionally, you're going to need that at some point. So think about that from a 5-year plan. Where those sources of capital are going to be. Get your books in order, so that even if they're not impressive at this point, they're ready to go to be able to go into that planning phase with the numbers correct. The reactive comment is so true, because I see business owners that are tapping into expensive capital facilities. I mean, Stripe funding and Shopify funding, which is all receivables funding, that type of thing, factoring, incredibly expensive sources of capital, but they're easy. They're easy to get, and when you're in a reactive state, you tap those, and that becomes how you fund your growth. But any business owner who's serious about growing a business, which I hope would be every single one of them, should really be looking at, even if I don't need something now, I need to plan that I will, and who's going to help me design that capital strategy, put my finances in order, and identify where those potential sources of capital will be, even if it's 18, 24 months down the road.
Yeah, it's kind of like you always need money on standby, which is what a line of credit is like. And then it becomes a matter of, can I get the money? Can I have multiple choices? Do I have a choice between equity and debt? What is it going to cost me? It's one of the things that keeps coming up in conversations, that most small businesses don't have a high profit margin. They're making a profit. They're maybe doing fine. They may be growing at a reasonable pace, but not a growth pace that's going to, appeal to a high flyer, somebody looking for a high rate of return. But that profit margin is still almost small compared to the current price of capital. If you have to go to a bank and the best deal they can give you is 10% interest rate, and your profit margin is 10%, you're basically working for the bank, as they call it. You're giving 100% of your profits to the bank for the use of their money so that you can come back and pay them again tomorrow. Nothing against the bank. That's what the bank is charging based on market rates. And then when you go out and somebody says, well, I want to do an equity investment and I need a higher rate of return because the risk associated with that, and they start talking about 14, 20, 25% cost of money, you go, where's that coming from? Now, it's possible that growth over time will achieve that kind of a payback, but it's very hard to do that. And so the business always not only needs to have money available, but they always need to be hunting for other money that's cheaper money, a lower price of money, and they need to be engaging in raising money in the most efficient fashion, because as we've talked about, if this becomes a fire drill where I needed the money yesterday to cover payroll, to buy some inventory, to keep the landlord from foreclosing on whatever space I'm renting, um, that's expensive. You can't expect a person like myself or Lucas to come in and say, hey, we'll drop everything. We're going to push all our other clients to the side. We are going to engage in processes that are expensive because we probably will need to bring in other people to help out. And this fire drill means that the cost of raising money went up exorbitantly. And this is already against a situation where you really can't afford to pay a premium on the price of money. You can't add to it the cost of raising money that puts you out of the picture. In my mind, as you described it, Lucas, any business that's growing at any pace at all needs to be looking forward far enough down the future to know what their capital requirements are going to be, and then start looking for different sources of capital that are easier to obtain at a lower cost, and not cheating, so to speak, by waiting till the last minute and go, oh, I can get this money over here, but it's 20% interest. It's hard money. You know, I saw I saw a loan last week where they'd loan you the money, but they wanted 3.5% of the money back immediately, and then they wanted 5.5% as a reward on the backside. Then they wanted 15% in the middle, and I was trying to add all these things up. I got, okay, now we're in the low 20s, for a loan, and I don't get to use all the money. I'm only using part of the money because I had to give part of it back to the lender and pay for everybody in between. Um, and I've seen bridge loans and factoring of receivables that have crippling rates of cost. So it's a situation that you want to get out of as soon as possible. and waiting till the last moment is not going to get you there. And then with all the other things going on in the marketplace, you don't know that your bank that you may have worked with for the last 3 years is going to give you that loan 3 years down the line. They may have a call by the Fed says you're out of alignment in your capital accounts. You need to quit making loans to any business that looks like this, which covers a lot of the businesses we work with. So it also helps to have secondary setups, and yeah, if you can get a line of credit that's there when you need it, as you need it, that's great. If you don't have one, you may need to have a second banker or another lending source for whatever you're doing with it. So building mortgage or equipment financing, so you don't get caught out.
Absolutely. And I think that having conversations with lenders and investors in a time when things are kicking along and going great are more pleasant conversations to have. That those are relationship building conversations where you are telling people that may be involved with your business in the future about your business at present. So, if it's maintaining those relationships and then you get to the point where you do need some capital. I mean, during COVID, and I was the finance manager for a manufacturing company, I was able to put a call in to a friend that a banker friend that I had a relationship with, that was immediately able to jump in and help me um, with some funding. But if I'd called him off the street, I mean, it's just a different conversation. So I think that part of your duties as a business owner, and certainly mine as a CFO, is to cultivate those relationships and talk to people when you're not in a time of need about your business.
Yeah, I mean, as you said early in the show, the best time to raise money is when you don't need it. And that's a great time to build a relationship because you can say, hey, look at me, we're successful. I may need some money in the future, but I don't need it today. And there's nothing more attractive to a source of funding to be told that they're of value, but they're not needed right now. And so setting up that relationship, so it is kind of like the fire alarm in the building. You can knock in the glass and know that the money's going to show up when you need it. Those are all things that require preparation and allocation of time to be ready when you need it.
And I think along the same lines, if you're a business owner and you've got a successful business, you know, don't go it alone. I mean, you want to talk to not just your bankers, but you want to talk to other people that are going to support you now and into the future. I mean, whether it's having a capital coach to talk to about a long term capital strategy, or a CFO that comes in for a couple hours a month and just reviews what your business is doing, or mentors your finance person to help them think about things in a different way or in a more strategic way. All those things are investments that you're making in your business now, even though you don't need a CFO at the moment. You don't need a capital coach. It's something that you hope you will need in the future, but rather than bring somebody like that or an entire firm in and do a complete cleanup of books that have been not kept well for 2 years, let's see where we are now and how we can make incremental changes to the future that will benefit you massively when it comes time to scale, grow, change, raise capital, sell the business. All these things need to happen in a gradual, ideally should happen in a gradual manner instead of all at once.
Yeah. Um, that's the theory anyway. So I know that I problem find myself statistically being called on too often, too late in the cycle, and it's not uncommon for somebody to walk in the door and go, "I need to raise money. I need it yesterday." And oh, by the way, I have no money to allocate to raising money. And what are you going to do for me? And oh, by the way, how soon can you get me that money that from someone that I don't know, who doesn't know me, who will not appreciate the fact that I've painted myself in the corner as a small business person and all these other things happen. But um, it is interesting to see, and I think that the other thing is that a lot of businesses still kind of default to going to a banker or a wealthy individual to get their funding, when there are so many other sources and types of funding out there, some of which can be very, very particular to a business that says, I've got to go buy a forklift. Well, there may be an equipment financing company that does nothing but forklift financing, or you may find that the manufacturer of those forklifts, they do their own financing, or they have a third party financing company they work with. And again, this is something that's good to know in advance. One, so that you know there's funding available, but two, it also gives you the ability to compare and contrast the cost of money to do something like that. But again, one of the things I've seen recently is we have some established relationships with what looks like a vendor who is going to be there for you, where you can ask for a time deferral on payment or something like that, and they get crunched. And suddenly they go, well, yeah, I was giving you 60 days to pay after shipment or something, and now, unfortunately, my bank's on my back. I need to shorten that to 30 days, or I need to go on a cash and carry basis. So I think that it's good also for you to check in with all the people who you're working with, and anybody who's extending you any form of credit, to make sure they're doing okay, and that they're not going to change the rules of engagement, while you're currently working.
Your supply chain is a fantastic source of funding in different ways. Your suppliers may become your investors. They may invest in your business by, um, extending the terms that you need and that type of thing. But again, that all starts with the relationship that you build with them. And it might, obviously it might be the business owner talking to the supplier who's owns the business. It might be the business owner's CFO that's talking to the supplier's CFO, and leveling with them on the financial state of the business, upcoming challenges, where they see things getting tight, that type of thing. That conversation goes a lot further than all of a sudden, I can't pay, you're going to have to wait for your money, because that supplier, even if they're forced to do it that time, they're not going to be very open to the idea the next time around. So again, it's the cultivation of relationships and the open conversations you're having with the people that are the most, or the people and organizations that are most critical to your business, and oftentimes those are supply chain.
Yeah, when I start doing a stakeholder analysis, which is my approach to identifying investor candidates, I typically will find that the supplier vendors to a business are the most knowledgeable. They understand that the success of that business will directly impact them, because they'll buy more products and services from that vendor supplier. And because they understand that much, they're in a better situation to get up to speed, to understand the needs of the business and what kind of capital requirement are there. And then if they're in a position to invest, if they have the resources, yeah, you may tag them for either a greater line of credit, a longer line of credit. You may get into different types of inventory financing. They may introduce you to their financing sources, because they want to keep you and grow with you as a business. And so the relationship, as you described it, becomes critical. If you treat that supplier as an interchangeable commodity, where you buy from them one month and then you buy from somebody else next month, you're not building that kind of relationship that you can lean on if you're going to need it for financing in the future.
Absolutely. We had one of the best um, funding situations with a VMI, vendor managed inventory situation, where we had ordered and committed to buy the inventory, but they kept it in their warehouse and gave it to us and invoiced us for it as we needed it. And that allowed us to, from a manufacturing standpoint, plan our production as if we had it in house, but not actually, we didn't have to actually have it on the balance sheet. So it was a very much a collaborative arrangement where they knew that it made it easier for us, but they also knew that we were committed to buying that inventory, and they didn't have to worry. It wasn't sitting on those shelves unallocated. So, you can only stretch that so far, but if you're consistently going through raw materials and you have a production plan that's um, thorough enough, you're going to know what you need in house, what you need on your balance sheet, and what you just need to know is available when you need it. So, again, those are things that a CFO can come in and help understand from a planning standpoint, from manufacturing planning. And, I think that's critical to not only running the business that's lean on inventory, but also having better margins and a right sized balance sheet um, in that type of environment.
Well, in the example that you used there, Lucas, you're basically gaining the advantage of having inventory without having paid for it. But you also got a secondary thing in that you didn't have to build a warehouse to hold the inventory, and all the costs associated with that. So your vendor in that case is not only basically financing your inventory, but they're financing the warehousing and storage and everything that goes along with that.
Right.
And so these are things that, again, some people don't think through it. They don't appreciate the value that's there in that kind of a relationship and how it saves them money. And in some ways, I treat it as a form of investment. Anytime I don't have to write a check, I don't have to spend a dollar because somebody did something for me, that's in my mind an investment in me and my company and what I'm doing. So it's important to look at all your cost of operations, and again, it's a common challenge. A small business too often thinks I've got to raise all this money. I'm going to buy everything. I'm going to buy everything new. I'm going to get a brand new building. I'm going to buy cars. I'm going to buy everything when they could have taken a small dollar, slow dollar approach and said, well, what if I can get somebody else to do that? If I could buy something used, or I don't have to buy it at all. It's not uncommon these days to find somebody with a building that's much larger than they need that's happy to rent out the back half of the building for pennies on the dollar compared to what the market rate is, because it's found money to that other person, but to you, you just saved a ton of money on rent.
Right.
And again, to me, that should be good, smart business, but it's also a form of financing what you're doing and finding investments where they can be found.
Absolutely. You Accounting is often given a bad rap because it's just dollars and cents and math, right?
It's
But
boring. It's boring,
it,
Lucas. Just admit it.
it is. I mean, we're not. You know, I don't go to parties and talk about my work because it's not exactly entertaining. Um, but knowing, being able to look at a business and understanding how the numbers flow through and what the positive aspects and what the challenges are allows me to suggest um, different scenarios like that will allow them to free up capital, that will reduce the amount of inventory on their balance sheet it's just, it should be money in the bank instead of sitting on the racks. And I think that it's aligning yourself with somebody who can come in and do that on a part-time basis is going to pay for itself. And I actually personally refuse to work for a client where I'm not adding value, where I'm not going in and providing something that I think will pay for my services, because it's not fulfilling for me to be in that position. So, for any small business owner that is struggling, whether it's with cash or margins or having difficult conversations where you have to sit on the other side of the table from an investor or a banker asking hard questions about the finances or the accounting of the business, why do that to yourself? I mean, you've got bigger things to do. You've got a business to run. You've got a product to design. You have been successful in doing this thing with your business. why try to become that person that you don't want to be? Let the boring people do that for you.
Mhm. I can see your next advertisement campaign. Hire me. I'm a person who loves being boring. I can almost see that. But no, every small business is going to be shorthanded. That's just part of the thing. As you start and grow, you need more people, more talent, more things, and you're going to start from a very nebulous, typically yet to be defined starting point, and you're trying to add detail to that as you go along. And doing it intentionally, methodically, gives you a higher probability you're going to get where you want to go, and bringing in experts, whether it's HR experts, it's accounting financial experts, it's a person who may know how to run a particular type of business or operation. Bring them into your board of directors. If you can't afford to bring them on full time, put them in a board of advisory position if you need them on a standby basis. Build a community of people within your supply chain, within your industry, however that in your community of people who are going to support you if and how you need that. And this is all a challenge because again, we're talking about doing things that are not in effect taught in business school, not taught even well yet in entrepreneurial programs. That these relationships that you need to be building as you grow, that you need to establish and maintain, will be an investment you have to make in your own future. And it's one of the best investments you can make, to have people that you know you can lean on, trust, know what they're doing, who can pick up the ball and run with it faster than you ever did. Um, all good.
Absolutely. I mean, I talk about it from a team approach. I mean, you're a business owner, and too often you're kind of on your own, and you're trying to do everything at once, and you've got people working for you, and they're your team. But I'm talking about your team, your whether it's your finance guy or your HR expert or your even your financial advisor, or your lawyer, or your CPA. All these people need to be on your team, and if they don't feel like they're on your team, probably not the people you want to have on your team. You want to have people that want to be on your team, that are committed to the success of your business, even if, as you said, they touch in at once a month, or you have lunch every couple of weeks, or whatever it may be. Those people are going to help you succeed. And it's you, as you said, that you may not even be paying them, but you might. But either way, if they're not committed to helping you succeed in your business, they're not part of your team. But find those people. It's imperative.
Yeah, and I like to use the more expanded definition, which would include everybody in my supply chain, every supplier, vendor, every reseller, retailer of a product. And if you think about it, you've got the people who supply your web platform. You've got any of the software vendors you use in the operation, your CRMs or accounting software. You've got all these different people, and you kind of want them all to know you, understand you, and as you described it, if they don't believe in your success, if they don't treat you as important, maybe you should be getting somebody else to work with. And at the same time, consider what you're doing for them. How do you fit into their success? And,
Right.
and it's an interesting thing where too often I think we all treat relationships too transactional. We kind of say, I bought it, I paid for it, I'm done, I've done my job. But that doesn't mean that person's going to be there next time when you want to buy something, or that you're trying to sell your products, and you're thinking, well, they sold my products last year, why won't they sell them again this year? And so all these things contribute to the need to establish the relationships, to be forward looking, and to get your financials not only in order going backwards, but going forwards in time.
So, Carl, we only have a few minutes left, and we're on the topic of financial readiness and when it comes to your financials, or fundraising readiness when it comes to your financials. I have this note that I've been meaning to get on the show, and I would encourage all business owners to place a special emphasis on your gross margin. Why? Because when anybody looks at your financials, the first thing they're going to look at to ascertain that you're keeping diligent books, that you understand how your business is performing, is whether or not you have a gross margin that is reflective of what it costs you to generate the revenue that you're posting on your P&L. And that gross margin should take into account cost of goods sold, cost of sales. That's pretty basic. But what they're looking for is, as revenue goes up and down, your gross margin goes up and down, but as a percentage, it stays roughly the same. So you may have a great month, you may have a terrible month, but your gross margin, still around 30%, whatever it may be. That will help them. The quality of earnings is kind of the term that they're going to be looking at, but that's going to help them right off the bat look at your financial statements and go, these are good, these are bad, or it's the first thing they're going to look at from a financial sophistication standpoint. So I would encourage you to put some special emphasis on that gross margin, and if it doesn't fit in that description I just gave you, get somebody that will help you get there, because that's the starting point for all of your outward-facing financials, but also your barometer for how the business is running from a financial performance standpoint.
Yeah, and that goes back to your earlier statement about using accrual financing in addition to cash flow financing or bookkeeping, because a lot of times a small business will buy something at the outset that actually is a long-term investment, even though it may be depreciated immediately for tax purposes or within a couple of years. It represents a cost that, if it's spread out over time, that makes your gross margin look better from an accrual standpoint, even though it may look terrible from a cash flow standpoint.
Yeah.
And so this is getting into understanding how to best present yourself, how to dress yourself up to go to the ball, so that you put on your best appearance when you're talking to someone who could be an ally, a relationship, a source of capital. And yes, it needs to be done, because otherwise you're forcing them to see something that may not look that pretty. You may have been in business for 3 years and never made a profit on a cash flow basis, where you might have made a profit from an accrual basis. And you don't want to start the story trying to unexplain or educate over why these books look so bad.
So that's actually an excellent example, because you might have been in business for 3 years, but you haven't been capitalizing your inventory. You've been expensing everything you buy, and not only have you not been profitable on a cash basis, you'll never be profitable, because as you continue to grow, you buy more inventory, and so you're tanking your business year after year, month after month. And all you have to do is help get some help in getting it into the right format, and your financials will look totally different. Your story is completely different. The people you talk to and the conversations you have with them will be completely different. And I think, as a business owner, I know you'll sleep better at night, because you know where you actually stand, instead of trying to eke out that profit every month, which will never do, because of one simple thing. And those are the things I love to be able to help with. And yeah, it's a big difference.
Yeah, so we wrap up for today. Thank you, Lucas, for being here on the show today and talking about getting ready to receive capital. And we've covered several different aspects of what is capital, where you can get it, what you need to do to put on your best face in order to receive capital. And it just basically gets down to doing better, and to the point where, if you're a small business and you don't have the time, or you don't have the knowledge, or you decided you didn't want to go back and get a master's degree in accounting, there are people out there like Lucas who actually enjoy working with numbers to help you get where you want to go. And that's a rare talent because I myself am not a fan of books and bookkeeping and so forth. And so I try to keep that in mind that if I don't want to do something, there may be somebody else who enjoys it. Um, so that brings us to the end of our show. Thank you for being with us today. We'll be on again next week. We're going to have Kathleen Minogue, who's going to talk about how you share your story with lots and lots of people within the scope of a capital campaign, which is its own art and science, and one definitely more people need to understand and learn about. And this week, I will be participating in Super Crowd 2024. It's an online event for the next 2 days. And I'll be speaking tomorrow on customer focused crowdfunding offers. So, trying to pass along a little bit of knowledge that I've gained in working with multiple capital campaigns for small businesses using a crowdfunding approach. And I welcome you to come back next week, see my newsletter on a daily basis. Lucas, hang on after we sign off the show. I'd like to chat with you a little bit more. Everyone take care, and we'll see you next week.